Thank you.
All right, go for it.
Thank you, John, and thank you to all of you who've joined in and uh, chose to spend your evening with us for whatever good reason. I hope to make it worth your while. But yeah, thank you. I miss meeting people the pre-pandemic days. It's something that I cannot shake it off. Every time I get into a Zoom call and I see all these faces, it's a bittersweet. I wish I could meet everybody in person and be in that room, and don't know how it's going to feel like once things open up back again. But I'm really looking forward to it, and let's continue to keep doing this as much as we can. So my name is Prashanth Mahakali. I'm an architect. I am a real estate investor. I am a licensed real estate broker. I am a builder, and I'm also a dad of a 3-year-old and a wonderful wife. And I have an architectural firm here in Chicago. And I also have a company that builds new construction single-family homes throughout the city of Chicago. In my architectural practice, which is about 12 years old now, I have worked on several different residential and light commercial properties as an architect, working for different clients, doing different things, different uses. But my love has always been residential and residential use commercial properties. So I have been I've tried to be active on the Bigger Pockets network, which is where John and I met, and try to answer some questions from people who are either desperately looking for answers or who are just being there, getting some information. So that's how we got introduced, and here I am, and it looks like I see all your eager faces. So I hope you're able to leave this in an hour with a wealth of information. And feel free to hit me up on Bigger Pockets if I can help you achieve or help you share any information about any deals that you're looking up. I'm happy to do that and be a resource for you with no obligations whatsoever. So for this presentation today, I specifically wanted to split it into 4 different unique topics. The first one being why an architect is essential in your real estate strategy and real estate, investment strategy. And the second part is, a little bit about the building and zoning codes, which you need to know or be aware of in order to get into real estate and thrive. And the third part would be about building violations, which are, probably the worst thing that can happen to a property owner is be slapped with a violation. So what to do to avoid, or what to do when you get one, and what to do after to prevent violations. And then the last part is new construction. A lot of us as investors are into looking at properties that are existing already, and we renovate it, add value, and then try to make the best out of it. An alternate strategy, if you're up for it, could be starting up from scratch and tearing down or developing a piece of land and finding the best and highest use for it. So those are briefly the 4 topics I'll be touching on. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up, and I'll also leave some space at the very end so we can have some questions answered. So the first one is an architect. Who's an architect? An architect is someone who helps you navigate the process of getting a building permit or finding the highest and best use for the property, and someone who knows the codes enough to tell you or advise you which way is the most profitable way as an investor, in terms of finding the highest and best use, or finding the balance between spending the money and getting a return on your investment. Hopefully, you find an architect who is, investor friendly, and which is the biggest issue that most investors face right now, is their architect is there only to just give them a set of drawings and then disappear. And when that happens, you typically are left on your own, or at the mercy of your contractor, or the mercy of your own Google search to kind of figure out what to do after that. Another alternate way to think about it is finding when you're interviewing an architect for your project, you're asking him or her about their experience on working on a similar project, and why is it that they are good at what they do, what differentiates them from other architects. So when someone asks me why they should hire me, and I immediately say, well, I'm an investor myself, and I speak the language of money, and I don't come at you from design. A very pretty looking door is worth nothing to you if it costs $100 more than what you should have spent. So when you talk in the language of money and finances, it balances and equalizes the conversation. If I talk about Victorian design, and if I talk about modern architecture, people lose the conversation. And that's very important for you to know. Does the architect speak your language? Are you able to understand this person and what they're saying, so that the communication is very effective, so they get what you're in there for? If you come to a property and you come in to a property and say, hey, Mr. Architect or Miss Architect, I want to develop this property and do some renovations to it so I can sell it for X amount of dollars, that's an immediate money conversation. It's not a design conversation. It's first money, and okay, how much money do you have? How can you can stretch the value of your money, and what you should do and what you should not touch, because those are all vital elements that could make or break your project. Any architect can give you a very pretty set of drawings that will make them look really, really good, but they're worth nothing, or they're probably worth, they'll actually take you down if you end up, executing whatever's in those drawings without following, how much it's going to cost you, right? So that money conversation with your architect is especially important. And when they say, no, I'm not really familiar with how much things cost, that's a red flag, because then they really are not able to help you the way you want. That's very important. You have to pre-qualify an architect by having this money conversation. A lot of people are uncomfortable with it. I am not. I start off with, okay, let's, if you choose to really hire me, here are the questions that I want to ask you. Where is your money? Where, what is the source of your funds? What do I need to make sure that, what's your exit strategy? Where are we going to, go with the project? And all these questions kind of get me the why of the project, of the investor. Why are you doing this? And when I figure that why, I'm able to give that person, like my client, the best service possible. Because if that person is just looking, get me in so I can have 3 paying tenants, okay, you need the bare minimum to meet code, make sure that the property is in good working condition, and then you're off, doing to the next property. But if your why you're doing this is, I want to have this great property that looks really, really good, it's very energy efficient, then that's a different conversation. So I hope that makes some sense in terms of why the architect may help you win, or will take you down if you follow the drawings in a project. So it's very important to have that conversation, especially if you know that an architect is required. And I always share this tidbit, which is you can pick up the phone and talk to any architect who does residential work, and you can get a free piece of advice from them. So don't restrict yourself to calling one architect when you can call 5 different architects, because they all have something different to offer. And you want to have these conversations and get used to talking to different professionals and getting a different perspective on how they look at the same property that you're talking to them about. And then finally select somebody that really speaks your language and, is able to commit to why you're doing this and help you, in that path. So that's, I think, a very important part of why I'm still continuing to be in the profession. And a lot of my clients are investors because they know that, if I'm not able to get a permit in, 30 days, then it means it's going to cost them some money, right? I understand that, and I value, their time, and I value their money, and, everything that they bring together, because this is, quite honestly, their, one of the biggest investments they're about to make. So I take that very seriously. So that's, something to give you about, a piece of why an architect is a very essential part of your strategy. So hopefully you're able to take, whatever I shared with you, and have multiple conversations with architects, because they can really expand your perspective on real estate investments. The second part that I have, want to talk about is, the building codes and zoning codes. Very often, by way of, hearing other people talk or hearing other people discuss, the building codes and zoning codes are, made out to be this really complicated set of instructions or laws that you have to follow in order to make the property, up to code. So I have a very, starting simplistic way of looking at a property in terms of evaluating it. So if you go to a property and you're looking at this property, and you're able to hit your head on the ceiling, chances are it's too low, right? So you don't need an architect to tell you, oh, okay, you need the ceiling height to be X amount. That's going to be an automatic structural adjustment, because you need to dig down and do some structural work to the basement, and it's going to cost you some money, right? So right there, you can eliminate that question. Okay, I am not in this, I'm not going to do this. This is not for me. Okay, let's get past that, right? So you're walking through this property, you get past the basement ceiling height issue, you know that you're going to dig down and it's going to cost you money, but you're okay with it because there's enough equity in the deal. Then you go up there, and then you see you're going through the property, and then you get stuck, and you have to turn all the way back to go back from where you came from. That's a red flag. Why? In a case of fire, if that exit gets blocked, I'm done. So right there, that property has some code deficiencies. This is all like common sense stuff, right? And then, when you go up, so it needs another exit. So any piece of property that you buy, ensure that it has two means of egress. Now, code will give you some options where you can get away with one means of egress in certain cases. And egress is basically your fastest way to get out of the building in cases of fire. But typically, when you are starting off, you always want to look for properties and create instances where you have two means of egress. Why? It just increases the safety of the building, right? There are specific building codes that your architect or your contractor will advise you on, but just for you to know, without any complicated, lingo, know that you need to be able to, in case of a fire, you need to be able to have two means of egress so that you can escape out of the building, right? That's for you or your tenants or your family, whoever it may be. And then you have a few other things that you can look for, which is, does the property smell weird? Well, there's a plumbing issue, right? It's probably not vented very well, and does the electrical panel feel like, you might go into properties where you're checking over, people are living there already. There are like 10 different wires attached to one receptacle. Chances are they're overloaded the circuit, and there's not enough juice in the building, so you have to upgrade the electrical service. These are all like things that you can just look. So it's always interesting for me every time I go into a property is, what am I looking for, right? Versus I can be in a property for 20, 30 seconds, I can pick up all these things. That's because I've been into multiple properties, and it has nothing to do with my experience. It has to do with what you're looking for when you walk into a space, right? So these are all like very common sense based building code things that you can look at. Now, once you get past it, it is never a way for you to like avoid using an architect. It is just for you to get started. Hey, I noticed that there was this weird smell. Do you think that there could have been like a plumbing issue? And the architect can kind of dig into that. So once you do your due diligence in a very systematic, methodical, common sense way, the architect can kind of help you take it to the next level, right? Because then they're looking for more. Okay, so you're automatically qualified as a very educated client, so they're going to give you a level of service which will go far beyond the typical stuff. So make a list for yourself as to what you're looking for when you go to a property. So when you go, I'm going to check out this property, it is not oh, let me just peek in there and make a few comments about how bad people are living there and just say it's really dirty and then come back out. Rather, you're going inside, you're looking for stuff, right? You're looking for electrical, plumbing, and heights, egress, safety, smoke detectors and all of that. Once you start looking at all these things, it just, you're automatically, getting into that mode of, knowing what to look for. And if something doesn't look right, you'll automatically know, right? And that's the part you want to get to is you've started looking for these things so often that it becomes like a second nature for you if something doesn't seem right. And then the architect is there to help you, the contractor is there to help you, but your first line of defense is make sure that you know what you're looking for even before you bring the architect or the contractor into the space, because you get to evaluate the property first, right? So in terms of zoning code, there are two differences. Building codes deal with the stuff that is inside the walls, the egress, the life safety issues. There's another thing called zoning code. Zoning codes deal with the maximum use, the best use of a property that is allowed based on where it is located within a neighborhood. For example, in Chicago, you have residential zoning, you have commercial zoning, you have business zoning, you have manufacturing zoning. You have different kinds of zoning districts, and you have restrictions on what you can use or what kind of uses you can have for the property within these zones. Now, this is common no matter where you live in the United States, right? Pretty much most places that have an address are within some kind of zoning district. There are exceptions, obviously, to that, but your knowledge of the zoning code will help you stay a step ahead of other investors who are looking at the same piece of property. So, for example, if you know your zoning codes, it will allow you to research and say, okay, I can add an additional unit in the basement. This is just an existing unused space right now, but because there's a zoning an allowance, I can add and expand the maximum use of the value of the property. On top of that, you also know that, okay, there are instances in which you could change the zoning district if certain hardships exist. So for example, your property could be a triangular lot, right? Most people run away from it, but some people go look only for triangular lots because they know that because of the hardship of a triangular lot, they can pretty much propose any use and get away with it, because now they have a reason for proposing that use. Oh, I want to have 5 units here instead of 4, and provided zone, and you can ask for a zoning change based on the hardship. Now, I'm not advocating that you should know the ins and outs of zoning code, but having a knowledge that you could ask for a zoning change based on a hardship is valuable information. And you could look at something, you could look at a piece of property much differently than another investor who's a novice, right? And you also, are looking at different possibilities, whereas they're just looking at, oh, how can I renovate this and just make the best and highest and best use of this property, right? And you're looking at, what can I add to this property? What if I tear down and build new? And there's so many other possibilities. Or I could change the zoning and then build something completely different from what is there. So those are all things that And these codes are all online, no matter which village or city you live in. Most of the zoning codes and building codes are now online. So from the comfort of your computer, you could look up your own zoning district where you're at right now, look up what you can do, and you can find out if your property is a conforming property or a non-conforming property. What that means is basically, has your property been already maximized to its highest and best use, right? um, and these are all things that you can find out by yourself, and looking at your zoning district and all that. And when you have the chance to talk to somebody else about it, you can bring up the argument where, hey, I am currently in a R4 district, can I change it to an R5? Then they say, well, why would you do that? Then you say, well, I want to add another unit. And then we bring up parking. Do you have enough parking spaces? So the conversations get much better when you are educated with the codes, right? And I'm not advocating, again, for knowing the ins and outs of codes, but a general basic knowledge of both the zoning and the building codes will make you a very, very, seasoned investor without having to spend 10, 15 years in the business. So I always advocate that. And you can, look up different pictures. Every time you look at a picture of a property, there's so much you can get from that. It's not, you can, when I look at new construction pictures and I look at in my competitions, real estate listing pictures, I'm looking for something. I'm not looking at a picture. I'm looking for, are those outlets next to the kitchen countertop, GFI protected? Are those, like, I can tell right away a few things that, because I'm looking specifically for them. But it also gives you an idea of how what the quality of the workmanship is just by looking at the pictures from your knowledge of the building codes. And right now, in this day and age, you have so many resources online that I would ask you to kind of like, get a refresher course just in like what to look for. Anytime you've gotten a home inspection report, it's a great way for you to kind of like familiarize yourself with what is a home inspector looking for. And then you could go look for the same things in your next property when you're going to go check out your next deal to buy. Okay. So that's about the building and zoning codes. The third part, is the building violations. Now, building violations are, something that most people want to avoid, but some of them cannot, and some of them actually want it, like really, really bad. Why? Because if a property has a lot of building violations, chances are I can pick it up for much less than market value. Why? Most investors are scared of touching a property with building violations, and then the two most scariest words are as is. Nobody wants to buy a property as is, right? But there are, if you know what you're doing, and if you have a great team next to you, the as is should not scare you. In fact, you are attracted to as is properties with a reasonable expectation of, the final result, right? If the as is means structural damage, that's, something to run away from. But if the as is means damages that you can, or violations that you can correct just by, having a good knowledge, having a good architect and good contractor next to you, you should not be scared of it. That's why if you're in this business and you're it's a risk strategy, right? You're taking a risk. So if you are able to take that risk on a very calculated, methodical way, that is the single way in which you're going to like progress faster and succeed faster and pick up more units and, potentially make more money. If you run away from risk or you take dumb risks, then it's going to, take longer for you to achieve that success and in whatever that, looks for you, right? So I would say building violations are something that should not scare you, but you should know the legal process around building violations, because that will actually help you. As an investor, you are buying and selling properties, and you meet your attorneys during these transactional um, uh, times, which is either to buy or to sell a property, or when you're under contract. But I encourage you to have an additional conversation with your attorneys and find out the legal system wherever you're living. If a property gets a violation, what does it take for you to get the violation dismissed? Okay. Now, if you're not in Chicago, it might look, different in different, counties, villages, and cities. If you're in Chicago, everybody knows that they don't want to do nothing with violations. They just run away from them because it's like the scariest thing for them and they don't want to do anything with it. But where I come from as an architect is I look at the building violation I evaluate in two ways. Is it a life safety violation, which means that people could die if you don't fix this? Or it's not a life safety violation, but it needs to be taken care of sooner rather than later. Now, if it's the first case, we go make drawings in a hurry, get a building permit, and just knock it out so that you get it dismissed. Why? Every day that you have a tenant in that violated property is a risk that you as an investor is taking on for $0. Like literally, the no amount of money or rent that you can collect from these people is going to substantiate the risk you're about to take by having this violation pending on your property, if it's a life safety violation. If it's a violation where it's not essentially a life safety violation, but it's a violation that someone noticed and you have to take care of, people can continue living there, safely. What I do is try to immediately figure out a way where you can develop a timeline for taking care of the violations, right? So you don't want to go and be in a hurry and just get the tenant out and go and try and fix this violation. You want to take your time, have a strategy in place, which is month one, I'm going to have my attorney go in and ask for a continuance. So I get more time if it's a legal issue. And then I buy myself, I buy my client at least 3 or 4 months. So in that 3 or 4 months, we develop a strategy for applying for a building permit and then applying for the required permissions and the inspections and everything, so that at the end of the 4 months, it's done. And then the unit or the property is violation free. Now, some people cannot go to sleep if they get a violation, right? They have to get it done. It's like a parking ticket or a speeding ticket. You want to take care of this right now. You go online, you put the ticket number, you should figure it out, and then you just get all this done because you just can't go to sleep, without taking care of it. Where I come from is, as soon as I figure out that it's a non-life safety violation, I tell them, let me take care of the headache. Okay. It's not for you to worry. And that's why you hire professionals. You don't want to take on the burden of uh, getting a building violation dismissed. And you will run into it. If you're going to do this for the long haul, you're going to run into a situation where you will get a building violation, or you might know somebody who has a building violation. The first thing to determine there is it a life safety violation or not? If it's not a life safety violation, just tell them to relax for a little bit, just have a plan in place, and then execute the plan with a good team in place. And when I say a good team, you have 3 essential people in the team, which is the architect, if one is required, a good contractor who is able to be with you until the violations are dismissed, and last but not the least, an attorney. Now, these 3 professionals are essential for you to have a property free of any encumbrances, no violations, always in good condition, and making sure that you've had the highest and best use figured out for right now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So just because your property is in good condition right now, and you don't have to stop thinking about it. You may put it on your calendar to call your architect every other year, every 6 months, whatever the time frame that you're comfortable with, and check in with the architect. Even if you have no business, no project for him or her, they would appreciate the call. Why? Because they're looking at different possibilities. That's why I always encourage my clients, and I sometimes call my clients for no reason. Why? These are all past clients who've had everything figured out, then they don't have any projects, but I am talking to them about, hey, have you thought about maybe adding a unit in the basement. And they're like, oh, thank you, Prashanth, for calling me about it. And then they get the zoning lawyer involved and the attorney involved, and and I will, I would have, before I make the call, I would have done my research, right? Because I know that as soon as I, bring up this issue or bring up this possibility, my client is going to have a lot of questions, and I already have the answers for that. So you want to have a proactive architect on your side who's able to like kind of push the limits of the codes and give you the best advice possible. And from there, you want to have a contractor, a relationship with a good contractor who's able to like help you keep your properties in order, right? And this contractor is potentially the most important part of the team, because he or she can actually help you make sure that whatever work is done and whatever amount of money that you're paying goes in the right direction, right? Finding out the best deal for building materials, making sure the labor is great, and making sure the job site is clean. So you learn a lot about your contractor, and when you develop a relationship with this contractor over the years, there are a lot of fun things that you can do in having new possibilities for the same property, right? So always have if you have a good relationship or a good experience with a contractor, save their number and give them a call, every now and then, because I'm sure they're definitely appreciated. In terms of attorneys, there's so many legal issues around owning a property. Make sure that you have a great attorney by your side who's able to like advise you from the ownership structure, and making sure that you have great contracts and great contract language with your tenants. And then when you have a property that is going to be sold, you have a conversation with your attorney before you put it on the market and figure out what the tax situation is. There's all these different components, and sometimes a single attorney might not be the best answer, although it's the easiest answer. You may have to go to 4 different attorneys who specialize in all these things. So research and ask all these tough questions. Everybody wants to say yes to everything all the time, right? Can I do this? Can I do this? Yes, yes, yes. So if and someone comes to me and says, can you build a skyscraper? I would say I would love to. I don't know how, but I'm not going to tell you that I can do it. So here's the best firm that you can go to get a skyscraper done. I'm obviously exaggerating a lot, but you know what I mean. It's you don't want to have the same person for every kind of project, and you don't want to have the same kind of attorney for a property tax appeal, for your real estate closings, for your zoning, for a building violation. Those are all like very specialized, and there are a few attorneys who can do it all. And if you have one of those, God bless you. And it's not easy. And these people become really busy, and at sometimes they might be difficult to get hold of, right? That is why I strongly believe that you should have a big team of people rather than relying on one person for everything, right? And it comes true to me as an architect. When someone comes to me and says, hey, Prashanth, I want to do a daycare, I'd be like, yeah, I can do it, but I'm not your best bet for your daycare. But when someone comes to me and say, Prashanth, I have a building violation, can you help me? I'm the guy for it. No matter what, I will convince you that I'm the guy for it, right? So that's how confident you want the professionals that you're working with to be on your side, knowing fully well they've done it 100 times before. They're going to offer you the best service when you go to them. It's 7:35, and the last, I'll take 5 minutes, and then we can have about 20 minutes or so for Q&A. So the last strategy that I want to invite all of you to explore is new construction. A probably about 95% or 90%, I would say, of real estate investors look at the existing buildings and making them better and flipping them or holding on to them as a solid strategy. It works, and it works for a lot of people. It's probably going to work for you, right? Having said that, I want to take you on a small journey to another part of the real estate investment strategy, which is new construction. Not many people consider it because they think it's too expensive. They think it's too complicated. They think it's something that they will never be able to do. And I'm here to prove you all that, if you have such thoughts, they're probably unfounded. They're not, based on reality. Okay. I'll tell you why. When you're looking at a piece of property and you're competing against a new construction, guess which one's going to sell first? Depending on all other factors being the same, people are generally drawn towards new construction. So you want to consider the new construction as a potential source, and it's not as complicated as people might have led you to believe. In fact, I would, go out on a limb and tell you new construction is easier than rehab in some ways. And you might all be thinking, wow, that's impossible, Prashanth. There's no way. But I can tell you, in some cases, not all the cases, in some cases, it's just digging a hole in the ground, putting a foundation, and putting up this new structure and calling it a day and moving to the next one. You can get your cost of construction figured out from sitting in front of the computer without ever having to go to the job site. And I can do a much better pro forma sitting at the job site and looking at Google than even taking 5 tours of the same property, right? Now, the way you come at a new construction property, or in fact, any real estate strategy, in my opinion, is go at it as a partner, with partners. You don't want to take, I think real estate is more fun when you practice it with other people who are like-minded, or sometimes light-minded, who are not too serious about it, and they're able to offer you value, right? I would say, if new construction is something that you should definitely research on, and look at your immediate neighborhoods or the neighborhoods that you're looking at, and see if anyone else is doing it. And if someone else is doing it, the numbers work, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So you definitely want to consider all of these factors when looking at the neighborhoods that you're looking to pick up properties, right? And it may not be an immediate strategy that would work for you right now, but a few years from now, it could be. And even the property that you're considering right now, find out what is the new construction potential, development potential of that property, maybe 3 years, 5 years from now. Then it's a 5-year hold to develop strategy. All right. And that is something that you want to look at, because if you look at a property and you see that, well, this property is going to be good for the next 5 years, after that, it's going to lose its value. And in that case, will it become a potential candidate for a new construction development? That is something that's going to make it, make you find a better strategy, a long-term strategy for the hold, because the hold need not be a hold forever. It could be hold for 10 years and develop. It could be hold for 5 years and develop. And obviously all the market research and the market numbers have to, support the theory. And then you can really look into new construction. And again, always talk to an architect, and he or she can give you best guidance on, what kind of property you can build, some basic costs, and who knows, you might, in 5 years or a few years from now, you might even look at only new construction as your strategy. So those are all the things that I have for you tonight. And, I know it's a lot of information I shared, and I would love to have any of your questions answered. And hopefully there's more information that I can share.
That was awesome, Prashanth. I'm going to allow everybody to unmute at this point. So if people have questions, they can jump in and ask you. One asked earlier about contractors that people have make changes like removing a wall, things like that. When would you contact an architect over your general contractor or a handyman, or what's kind of like the threshold for when you should reach out to an architect for most of us?
Yeah. So, if you have the basic knowledge to identify whether a wall is load bearing or not, that is, usually it's not rocket science, but you can figure it out if you're really looking for it. It's usually like perpendicular to the distance to the if a home is narrow, your bearing wall is running along the length of the building. Okay. Quite often you can go to the basement. If the ceiling joists are exposed, your bearing wall is running in the opposite direction above. So those are ways in which you can figure out if it's a bearing wall. Now, when you have to move a bearing wall, that's definitely a call for an architect or a structural engineer. If it's not a bearing wall, you still want to be sure that it is not a bearing wall. So it's still a call to an architect, but that architect you can really ask the architect, do I really need your services to move a non-load bearing wall, right? And the architect should say, well, not really, but here's what, if it's a creative architect, they'll probably give you something else to think about and find a way to like offer the services. So which is what I do. Just kidding. You know, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
That's awesome. So guys, feel free to jump in and ask questions. This is great.
Do you do work in all of Cook County or in DuPage County also, or do you kind of restrict yourself to certain areas?
I restrict myself right now to Chicago, but you know, my favorite thing to say is also the same thing. You call the building department, right? The way to find out who the architect is that you want to work with. If you really want to find out, call the building department of your local village and say, hey, can I talk to the plan reviewer? Okay. They're going to ask you which project, just give your address, right? And then you'll get to the plan reviewer and say, hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have got to you, but I really want to know which architect I should really work with. You see a lot of drawings come by your desk. Tell me some good architects' names, and I really want to go and talk to those architects.
That's
okay?
Great advice.
Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't take away business from other architects, but you know, it's usually a good way to find out who's keeping them busy at the building department. Yeah.
Would you say if someone else has a question, jump in, please.
I just had a quick one. Thank you so much for your time. I'm under contract for a 4-unit, and I wanted to jump back to what you were mentioning around egress. You know, how much of a deal breaker in the way you see things is it if, you know, let's say 2 out of 4 of the units only have 1 point of egress and zoning checks out as it is today, everything's sort of grandfathered in, but you know, from your experience, what kind of problems would that drive down the line? And is that a deal breaker for something like that?
So it's a nuanced question. I'll answer it differently. Can I ask you some questions?
Sure.
So is this your first property?
Second.
Have you had a property that has similar situation before?
I've had, my other property has some a little bit of a weird setup where some things are grandfathered in. Nothing specifically around points of egress though. So
I look at it from what if things go wrong, right? Have you had the experience to like take on, or is it going to disrupt your life wildly if that happens? So in general, unless you're doing this full time, stay away from properties that have egress issues, right? Now, it is possible for you to fix those egress issues. That's why I say talk to an architect and find out, at least for your own sanity, what it would take for you to make those, if it's even possible to make those units conforming with, you know, proper means of egress. That's going to give you enough information to decide, is it worth it or not? In my opinion, there's always another property for you to look at. And even though it feels like this is the property that really is talking to you, it's not the case. You know, I try not to get emotionally involved to the best of my abilities, but you know, I end up doing that. But egress is a big deal, right? Imagine getting a call that, hey, there's a fire in your building. You know, that's something that I would not wish on, you know, the worst enemy, because it's just something that you just don't want to deal with, right? And then they immediately dig into what information you had, and attorneys can pick everything apart, right? And then they'll say you're an inexperienced investor, you didn't know what you were doing, and nobody advised you. So it just leads to a lot of issues. So while I, you know, cautiously point you away from the property, do find out what it would take to bring the property up to code and then make the decision.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had a question.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you? So what would you suggest as either the quickest or the most efficient way in getting through the permitting process for someone who is going to be closing on a property? I guess when is the earliest someone could contact you, or the earliest you suggest someone contact you, and how early can they get ball rolling on that?
So I have a lot of my investor clients have me on speed dial, right? It's for a reason. If I have told them, hey, you can call me anytime, it's because I have trained them a lot over the years to like look for certain things before they even call me, right? Most of my investor clients, at least, and again, I'm open to taking on clients that have little to no knowledge about it and walk them through it. But typically the process goes something like this. They look at the Google Street View, right? And I've told this in other podcasts once before. In Google Street View, you can kind of, do the different last few years and see how the property looks over the seasons. Right off the bat, I look at that, number one. And then I look at any open data on building violations. And then I look at what they want to do to the property. And if there is a structurally urgent repair that needs to be performed. Based on all of that and based on what they want, they're asking me to get the permit for, I usually advise one or two things. If you are in a hurry to get a permit, assume that you will not get the permit in a hurry. Then what happens, right? So make sure that any contracts that you have, standard operating procedure for your attorney, contingent on clearing the violations, contingent on a structural engineer or an architect certifying that after the home inspection period is over, and if they find out some major repairs, have an engineer or an architect certify that these repairs can be fixed and for what cost. And based on that, you either buy yourself more time or a credit at closing, right? And then at the very end, if you really want to get a permit that does not involve anything like major, provided your lender is okay with it, you should be able to get a permit on it right after the closing. That is something that your architect can advise you on, or any architect can advise you on. But in general, do not get into a closing and permit situation. Those two things do not mix. I've tried my best in every situation. Very few instances that everybody walks away happy because the city or a village is involved and they don't care about your closing. Okay. Hopefully that helps, make a decision for you if you're in the situation.
John, we had a question in the private chat, which is, where do you do your new construction and like, how do you structure it? Is it you and partners? And obviously feel free to share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. I was 4 years ago, I started this company with two partners. I would not be able to do it myself. They're great for me. And, so the way I typically put a new construction deal together is I talk to 4 different investors. I do my research mostly in Chicago. I don't want, because I live in Chicago, I want to practice, whatever I'm doing within Chicago, because it helps me go in and, to the site and back very quickly. And I can cover 10 different sites within the same geographical area. But the way I typically put a deal together is I have a great relationship with the lender. I would say that's like the number one. Most lenders shy away from new construction lending. So you want to identify and have that lender, on speed dial so that you can kind of run these numbers with them, And I have a great lender, and I put together, investors who I know are high net worth individuals that have interest in real estate and new construction. And then I put them together, develop a pro forma. Pro forma is basically a list of all the expenses and anticipated return on your investment, and then share it with them and share it with the bank. And everybody agrees. And then the appraiser, kind of certifies my assumptions. And if it all turns out okay, then we go ahead and execute the project and then sell the project and give a return to the investors. So they want to do it again. So essentially a typical deal in Chicago that I can share numbers with, you'd buy the land or the property for say $250,000. And then you would have a construction cost of $450,000. That's 700. Soft costs and everything would lead to another $50,000, and points, soft costs. So you're all in for 750. I typically try to get about 900 to 925 as a sale price. Okay. Now, there have been instances where it's as little as, 850. My worst case scenario is we clear about 10% on the money that is as a down payment for the loan, which is usually 30% of the project costs. So if the project costs, $750,000, the bank expects you to come up with $250,000 in cash. So if you have two investors, you take 125 from each, you put the $50,000 from your pocket because you need to have some skin in the game. And then you go to the bank, and then they check their financials. They put the whole, packet together. If everything checks out, they lend. And then the contractor that you hire will draw out. And the best part about this is new construction is this: the contractor has to perform first and then get paid. So they're always ahead of you. So you're never, ahead of them. So they're always like trying to do the work and then get paid. So there's no chance of them getting cheated, cheating you, because they will not get paid. And it's all through a title company that holds the money. They'll distribute once you have all your lien waivers and you submit all the paperwork. So at the end of the day, when you go to sell, it's a very smooth transaction from start to finish, right? And you have to have permits because it's new construction. You have to have inspections because it's new construction. So overall, it's a very, predictable process, which is what I like. So a typical return of investment for my investors is about 30%. Now, that's not guaranteed, but that's the anticipated. I would not do a new construction project if the cash on cash return is less than 30%. I'd rather play in the stock market.
Prashanth, thank you very much for that. Are you talking about single families or multifamilies for these?
I deal specifically with single families.
Okay.
The deal with multi-family new construction projects is that it's a condo development. I mean, I don't do a whole lot, or I don't know of a whole lot of, smaller investors who do new construction to hold. It's very, difficult to, get your money back. But a lot of people do a condo developments, and with condo developments, the problem is you have to wait on the last unit being sold to get your profit back. So you could get stuck, right? So I'd rather do, 4 different locations for single family homes. But again, it all depends on the market you're looking for. And don't go too far away from where you're at, because it just is a recipe for, a poor quality of life.
Prashanth, I have kind of a funny question.
Yes.
So I ran into, about a year and a half, 2 years ago, my very first Chicago style porches, which was an unfortunate experience. How long do those things last? This is like a personal curiosity thing for me. And what's the expectation for an architect when you get a call about a porch? Do you deal with those much?
Oh yeah, we do about 70 to 80 porches a year. It's a significant part of our architectural business. I would say if it's, the old porches, the way they were built before the new code was introduced back about 10 years ago, those porches, they will stand, but you can't have a party on them, right? So this all goes back to that unfortunate incident that happened, in Lincoln Park, where the thing collapsed, and then that led to new codes, being written. The new porches built per the new codes, they can outlast the building, because the new codes are built for 100 pounds per square foot live loads. What that means is you can have literally every square foot of the porch have 100 pounds of weight, and the porch would not go anywhere. So that's how strong they make you build those. So the interior of the homes are only built for 40 pounds a square foot. So it's 2.5 times better or stronger than the house itself. So that's just give you an idea. So it all depends. And if I go to a property and has a new porch, boom, it lights up my eyes because I know that I don't have to worry about the exits for a long time. And wood porches are now almost as expensive as metal porches. They're a little bit less maintenance. Metal porches are good for the short term, but then 2 years later, you'll have to repaint them. It's a maintenance nightmare, but it's safer because it's not going to burn down on you.
What is it, as an agent, I run across them from time to time, and I almost try to scare people because I think that there's this thought that, oh, it's wood, I can just paint it, or, what does it ballpark cost if you're looking at a small, 2 to 4 unit for a porch, like in the back? Just
Sure.
ballpark.
The wood porches with, a decent deck space, it probably cost you around $15,000. The same metal version of it would probably cost you around 22 to 25. Right? It's the upfront cost. I typically try to, I do a lot of work for a very reputed porch builder. Efficiency is key, right? When you're doing a wood porch, you want to do the shortest footprint possible. Why? Because you don't want to give them space to grill. Okay. Grilling is the number one cause of fires, and they will grill. If you give them space, even if it's like, a couple of square feet of space, they will put a grill and they will grill on it. You can have all the signs on, the building, they will grill. So make it as efficient as possible. But if the market rents support more rents for a nice backyard space, think about a metal porch. You can give them a balcony and stairs, and you can say grill all you want, fellas, no problem. And you're making it the hallmark of your property. So that's my advice.
I'm quoting you on that one. If give them space and they will grill.
Yes. Yes. I've seen grills that you would not believe. Yeah. So,
That's awesome.
Does anybody else have any questions for Prashanth? I know we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to be respectful of his time. This is great stuff. Any final questions? Product, I don't know how you can unmute, man. I just saw your. Go ahead. I think I just fixed it.
I think, yeah, there we go. I got it. Yeah, I had a question. So I imagine that as an architect, you need to see the building in person like many other professions. Are you able to get most of the details of what an investor wants to do over the phone, or do you need floor plans or like a visit in person before, yeah.
So it depends, right? I'm able to do a fair amount of research online, sitting at my computer, punching in the address. Where I get curious is if someone sends me a picture that makes me curious, right? Then I want to go check it out myself. Something that I don't really understand, or for the most part, if it's a very typical building, I can give you a rundown on what to look for and all that just by not even visiting there. Again, pre-pandemic, default, I would go and meet, the clients at the job site and at the building they're considering. But right now, as with every other industry, we've gotten very efficient, or try to find ways to do the same thing more efficiently. So even if you FaceTime me from the property, that's another way I can, find out. It just saves you the time and to go meet and all that, and working out the times that would be convenient for me and you and the contract and all that. So for the most part, the answer is yes, I can, figure it out without visiting the property. But there are cases in which, depending on what the scope is, if it's a very life safety violation related issue, I'll be there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I want to give you a tidbit to everybody. I know that in the second breakout room, there are a lot of ready to go investors. I don't call them newbies. I just say they're ready to go because they're so eager to get started on their deals. But I want to share that, my first property, and I always share this with, in the other podcast too, which is, it's in Inglewood, and basically the worst part of Chicago that people claim. But I have two different perspectives on it. One, me being an architect, I had purchased the building in 2007. I got ripped off by a contractor that I used to do drawings for. So me being an architect got ripped off, which I'm not very proud of, but it taught me a lot of valuable lessons and keeps me humble even now, because that's the one property I've never been able to get rid of. So no matter how hard I try, I will not be able to get rid of. But I never say die. I might be able, if I do that, I will make sure that I make it very, very public. And number two, even in the middle of Inglewood, when I say Inglewood, there's an automatic connotation where, oh, things must be really bad. I'm very proud of that property, because it took me a long time for me to find the right property manager, the right tenants. And believe it or not, I share a very good relationship with all the three tenants. It's a smaller building, and it's in a very good part of Inglewood. And I am very, very proud of being an owner of that building, right? So if you do your research right, if you are able to get, willing to put the time into it, you can be in the middle of a war zone and be the best, most profitable landlord that there is. And it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes the willingness to get into the weeds of it and just get it done. So I'll leave you with that story. Hopefully I was able to share some good information with all of you, and and have a great rest of the month. I know we've been through a lot, and maybe on the other side of things, I will probably end up seeing all of you in person at one of these meetups. Thank you.
Prashanth, thanks so much for coming. That was amazing. Really enjoyed that. And anybody that's interested in contacting Prashanth, the information I put was there in the chat. We'll make sure that it's on the YouTube channel as well when we get this thing uploaded to YouTube. And again, thanks for coming, Prashanth. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Bye.